The Montana Territory stretched out like a vast, indifferent god. Endless grassland rolled beneath a sky so wide it could swallow a soul whole. No mercy lived here, no second chances. Just dirt, wind, and the kind of silence that made a person hear their own death approaching. Claire Whitmore had learned that lesson in blood. Her legs screamed with every step, a white-hot lance of agony that started at the bullet wound in her thigh and radiated up through her hip down to her toes. The makeshift tourniquet she'd tied, a strip of her petticoat, now soaked through with red, was losing its battle. Blood seeped down her leg, leaving a trail any tracker worth his salt could follow with his eyes closed. Behind her, the horses were getting closer. She didn't need to look back to know. The thunder of hooves carried across the flatland, rhythmic and relentless. 3 riders. Maybe 4. She'd lost count after the first one put a bullet in her during the ambush. The stagecoach massacre played behind her eyes every time she blinked. The sudden crack of gunfire, the horses screaming, the driver's body tumbling from his seat in a spray of crimson. 6 passengers, all dead within minutes. The outlaws had moved through them like wolves through sheep, methodical and merciless. Clara had only survived because she'd thrown herself out the opposite door and into a ravine, tumbling down rocks and scrub brush while bullets chewed up the ground around her. She'd hit the bottom hard, her leg erupting in fire, and she'd stayed there in the cold water of a creek bed until the shooting stopped. When she'd finally climbed out, the stagecoach was burning. The bodies were stripped of anything valuable, and the killers were gone, or so she'd thought. She'd been wrong. They'd come back looking for her 3 hours later, and she'd been running ever since. 12 miles. Maybe 15. Her sense of direction had abandoned her around the time the fever set in. The sun was dropping toward the horizon now, painting the prairie in shades of amber and rust. Beautiful, deadly. The temperature would plummet once darkness came, and she was already shivering despite the exertion of her desperate flight. Claire's boot caught on a root and she went down hard, her wounded leg folding beneath her. The pain was so intense she couldn't even scream, just gasped, a choked sound that might have been a prayer if she'd had any faith left. For a long moment, she just lay there in the grass, tasting copper and dirt. Her vision swam. The sky above her seemed to pulse and breathe. Get up or die here. The voice in her head sounded like her father's, stern, uncompromising. He'd been a hard man, a railroad foreman who'd brought his family west and died in a tunnel collapse before Clara turned 16. He'd taught her that the frontier didn't care about your pain, your fear, or your excuses. It only cared whether you could stand back up. She rolled onto her side, biting back a sob, and forced herself to her hands and knees. Her leg dragged uselessly. The tourniquet had come loose. Fresh blood, bright and terrible, soaked into the earth. The horses were so close now she could hear the jangle of tack, the heavy breathing of the animals. A man's voice called out, low, amused. She can't have gone far. Look for the blood trail. Clara's hands clawed at the dry grass, pulling herself forward. Ahead, maybe 200 yards away, stood a cluster of cottonwood trees following the line of a creek. It was the only cover for miles. If she could reach it. There! The shout came from behind her, triumphant and cruel. Hoofbeats exploded into a gallop. Clara lurched to her feet, her leg buckling immediately. She caught herself against a rock, pushed off, stumbled forward in a grotesque parody of running. The trees. Just reached the trees, 50 yards. The horses were right behind her now. She could feel the ground shaking. 20 yards. A rope whistled through the air and dropped over her shoulders, jerking tight. Clara hit the ground face first, the impact driving the air from her lungs. The world spun, dirt in her mouth, grass in her eyes. Rough hands grabbed her, flipped her onto her back. 3 faces swam into focus above her, bearded, filthy, grinning. The man in the middle was missing half his teeth. The one on the right had a scar that split his lip. The third was young, maybe 20, with dead eyes that had seen too much killing. Well, well, the gap-toothed one said. The little school teacher. Thought you could outrun us, did you? Clara tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. That's some trail you left, the scarred one said, nodding at her leg. Real considerate. Made our job easy. Should we do her here? The young one asked. His voice was flat, bored. Gap-Tooth shook his head. Not yet. Boss wants to make sure she didn't tell nobody about the robbery. We'll take her back to camp, ask her some questions. His grin widened. Might have a little fun first. Clara's hand moved, slow, trembling, toward the small pocket in her skirt. During the ambush, she'd managed to grab the stagecoach driver's derringer. 2 shots. She'd been saving them for exactly this moment. Her fingers found the grip. Hey! She pulled the derringer free and fired point blank into Gaptooth's chest. The report was deafening. The man stumbled backward, surprise blooming across his face along with a flower of red. Clara swung the gun toward the scarred one, but he was faster, backhanding her across the face so hard her vision went white. The derringer flew from her grip and landed in the grass. "Bitch shot Eddie!" the young one yelled. Clara's head rang. She tasted blood. Through blurred vision, she saw Gaptooth, Eddie, on his knees, hands pressed to his chest, blood pumping between his fingers. The scarred one grabbed her by the throat and squeezed. "You just made a real bad mistake, girl." Clara clawed at his hand, unable to breathe, unable to think. Black spots danced across her vision. "Jack!" Eddie's voice was wet, bubbling. "Jack! Shut up, Eddie." Jack's face was inches from Clara's, his breath hot and rancid. "I'm gonna make you hurt before you die. Gonna take my time with—" The crack of a rifle split the air. Jack's head snapped back in a spray of red mist. His hand released Clara's throat as he toppled sideways, already dead before he hit the ground. Clara sucked in air, gasping, her vision clearing just in time to see the young outlaw reach for his gun. Another rifle shot rang out and the kid spun, clutching his shoulder, his revolver falling from nerveless fingers. A 4th figure emerged from the cottonwoods, a man on foot, moving with the economical grace of someone who'd spent his life in wild places. He held a Winchester rifle like an extension of his body, already levering in a fresh round. He was tall, lean, dressed in worn trail clothes and a battered hat pulled low. A marshal's badge caught the dying sunlight on his vest. "Don't," he said quietly to the wounded outlaw. The kid, bleeding and terrified, raised his good hand. "Don't shoot. Don't—" The woman. "She with you?" No, we chased her. I know what you were doing." The marshal's voice was cold, empty of everything except a kind of tired certainty. "I heard the gunshots, saw what you had planned." Eddie was still alive, gasping on the ground, his shirt soaked through. "Help me." The marshal didn't even look at him. His attention stayed fixed on the kid. "How many more in your gang?" 4, maybe 5. They're at the old Pritchard place, 20 miles south." "Names." "Jesus, I'm bleeding." "Names." The kid rattled off a list, his voice shaking. The marshal listened without expression, then finally nodded. "Start walking." "What?" "You heard me. Start walking back to wherever you came from. If I see you again, I'll kill you." "My shoulder. Should have thought of that before you decided to hunt down an unarmed woman. Go." The kid staggered to his feet and stumbled away into the gathering darkness, clutching his wound. The marshal watched him until he was out of sight, then finally turned his attention to Clara. She was still on the ground, one hand pressed to her throat where Jack had choked her, the other trying uselessly to stem the bleeding from her leg. Her vision swam. She wasn't sure if the marshal was real or a fever dream. He crouched beside her, his movements careful and deliberate. Up close, she could see his face clearly. Weathered, hard-edged, probably 40 years old, but looking older in the way frontiermen often did. Gray streaked his dark hair, a scar cut through his left eyebrow. His eyes were pale blue, the color of winter sky. "Where's the wound?" His voice was gentler now, but still carried that flat competence. Clara tried to point to her leg, but her hand wouldn't cooperate. The marshal saw the blood, nodded once, and began checking her over with practiced efficiency. "Bullet's still in there," he said after a moment. "You're lucky it didn't hit the artery. Unlucky about everything else." "Who?" Claire's voice came out as a croak. "Who are you?" "Cole Barrett, U.S. Marshal." He was already pulling supplies from a pack, bandages, a flask. "What's your name?" Clara Whitmore." "You're the schoolteacher from Silver Creek." It wasn't a question. Clara managed a weak nod. "How did you—" "Been tracking these men for 3 weeks. Heard about the stagecoach attack this morning." His jaw tightened. "Couldn't get here in time to stop it, but I got here in time for this." Behind them, Eddie had gone silent. Clara didn't need to look to know he was dead. Cole followed her gaze, his expression unchanged. You shot him? I had a Derringer, 2 bullets. Only got 1 shot off before. You did fine. He was wrapping a proper bandage around her thigh now, his movements quick and sure. The pressure made Clara gasp. This'll hold for now, but that bullet needs to come out soon or infection's going to kill you just as sure as they would have. Can you do it? Cole's pale eyes met hers. Not here. Not in the open. We need shelter, clean water, and time. I got a place about 3 miles north. Think you can ride? Clara looked down at her leg, then at the bodies scattered around them, then back at Cole's weathered face. The man was a stranger. She knew nothing about him except that he'd just killed 2 men without hesitation and let a third go with what seemed like mercy or calculation. Every instinct she'd honed growing up in rough mining camps told her not to trust anyone out here. Every practical bone in her body told her she didn't have a choice. I can ride, she whispered. Cole nodded and stood, offering her his hand. Clara took it and let him pull her up. Her leg immediately buckled, but he caught her, one arm around her waist, holding her steady. Easy, I got you. For reasons she couldn't explain, Clara believed him. Cole's horse was a big buckskin gelding, steady and calm, despite the smell of blood and gunpowder. Cole helped Clara into the saddle. She had to bite her lip to keep from crying out when her wounded leg moved, then swung up behind her. Lean back, he said. I'll keep you from falling. Clara did as she was told, too exhausted to argue. Cole's arm circled her waist again, holding her secure against his chest, and he urged the horse into a steady walk. The prairie stretched out before them, darkening as the sun touched the horizon. Behind them, the bodies grew smaller and smaller until they were just dark shapes against the grass. Clara's head lolled back against Cole's shoulder. The others, she managed. The stagecoach. There were 6 people. I know. I found them. Could you? I buried them. His voice was quiet. Said what words I knew. It's what I could do. Tears burned Clara's eyes, the first she'd allowed herself since the attack. Thank you. Cole didn't respond, just kept the horse moving at that steady, careful pace. The rhythm was almost hypnotic. Clara's eyelids grew heavy. Stay awake, Cole said. Can't let you slip away yet. Trying. Talk to me. Tell me about Silver Creek. It was clearly a tactic to keep her conscious, but Clara grabbed onto it like a lifeline. Not much to tell. Came out last spring. Teaching 30 children in a 1-room schoolhouse. Most of them are miners' kids, good students, smart. What brought you out here? My father worked the railroads, moved us around a lot. After he died, I had to make my own way. She paused, gathering strength. Always wanted to teach. Frontier needs teachers just as much as it needs miners and ranchers. That's true enough. What about you? Clara asked. How long have you been a marshal? 12 years? That's a long time. Long enough to see most of what humanity's capable of. Not much surprises me anymore. There was something in his tone, a weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Clara recognized it. She'd heard it in her father's voice during his last years, when the frontier had finally worn him down to nothing. Those men, she said, the ones who attacked the stagecoach, you've been hunting them. The Taggart gang, led by a man named Samuel Taggart, mean as a snake and twice as poisonous. They've hit 6 stages, 2 banks, and a railroad payroll in the last 4 months. Killed 19 people that I know of, probably more. Cole's arm tightened slightly around her waist. You're the first witness who survived long enough to tell me anything. The kid you let go, why? Because he told me what I needed to know, and because he was young enough that maybe, just maybe, he'll decide killing for a living isn't worth it. Cole's voice hardened. Though I doubt it. Frontier doesn't let go easy once it's got its hooks in you. Clara wanted to argue, to say something hopeful about redemption and second chances, but the words died in her throat. She'd seen too much today. Hope seemed like a luxury for people who hadn't watched 6 innocent souls get murdered. The light was almost gone now. Stars began to prick through the deepening blue overhead. The temperature dropped sharply, and Clara shivered. Almost there, Cole said. 5 minutes later, Clara saw it. A small cabin tucked into a stand of pines near a stream. Rough-hewn logs, a stone chimney, a small corral out back with another horse grazing peacefully. Smoke curled from the chimney. "You were already here," Claire realized. "You saw the attack from here." "Heard the shots. By the time I got close enough to see what was happening, you were already running. Figured I'd do more good tracking you than riding into an ambush." He dismounted first, then helped Clara down with careful hands. Her leg wouldn't support her weight at all now. Cole caught her as she sagged and simply lifted her, one arm under her knees, one behind her back, and carried her toward the cabin. "I can walk," Clara protested weakly. "No, you can't." He kicked the door open and carried her inside. The cabin was small but well-maintained, a single room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, a bed frame with a corn husk mattress, shelves holding supplies. A pot bubbled over the fire, filling the space with the smell of coffee and beans. Cole set Clara down on the bed as gently as if she were made of glass. She sank into the mattress with a groan of relief. "I'm going to tend to the horse," Cole said. "Then I'm going to heat water and get my tools. We need to get that bullet out tonight." Clara's stomach turned. "Tonight?" "Can't wait. Infection's probably already starting." He was already moving toward the door. "There's whiskey on the shelf. Drink as much as you can stomach." Then he was gone, and Clara was alone in the flickering firelight. She looked down at her leg. The bandage Cole had applied was already soaking through. Her hands were shaking. Every breath felt like it took effort she couldn't spare. "This is how I die," she thought distantly. Not from the bullet, from the surgery to remove it. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she was reaching for the whiskey. Cole worked with the efficiency of a man who'd done hard things in hard places and learned to waste no motion. He unsaddled the buckskin, brushed him down, made sure both horses had water and grain. He checked his rifle, reloaded the spent rounds, and set it within easy reach. Then he hauled water from the stream, heated it over the fire, and laid out his tools on a clean cloth. Through it all, his mind worked with the same cold calculation it always did in crisis. Clara Whitmore was dying. That was the simple truth. The bullet in her leg had been there for hours now, grinding against muscle and bone with every movement. Infection was inevitable. Without surgery, she'd be dead in 3 days. Maybe sooner. With surgery, well, that was only slightly better odds. Cole had dug out bullets before. He'd patched up wounded men, set broken bones, cauterized wounds. The frontier marshal's job didn't end with catching criminals. Out here, you learned to be a doctor, a tracker, a diplomat, and an executioner all at once. But this was different. This was a woman. Young, maybe 25, educated. The kind of person who came west with hope instead of running from something. The kind of person who didn't deserve to die bleeding on a prairie. Cole had lost that kind of hope a long time ago. His wife and daughter were 10 years dead, killed by fever while he was off chasing rustlers. He'd come back to find their graves already dug, the house cold and empty. After that, he'd stopped thinking about deserving. The world gave you what it gave you. Deserving had nothing to do with it. He pushed through the cabin door with a kettle of boiling water and a basin. Clara was sitting up on the bed, the whiskey bottle in her lap. Half of it was gone. "Good," Cole said. "Drink more." "If I drink more, I'll be unconscious," Clara slurred slightly. "That's the idea." He set the kettle by the fire and pulled up a chair next to the bed. His tools gleamed in the firelight, a probe, forceps, a scalpel, needles and catgut for stitching. He'd cleaned them with carbolic acid. It would have to be enough. "I'm going to need to cut your skirt away from the wound," Cole said. "Is that all right?" Claire's eyes were glassy with pain and whiskey, but she managed to nod. "Do what you need to do." Cole drew his knife and cut through the fabric, exposing her leg from mid-thigh down. The wound was angry and swollen, leaking blood and clear fluid. He cleaned his hands in the hot water, then began washing the area around the bullet hole. Clara hissed through her teeth, but didn't pull away. "I'm not going to lie to you," Cole said quietly. "This is going to be the worst pain you've ever felt. You can scream if you need to. Nobody out here to bother." "Will it?" Clara swallowed hard. "Will it work?" "I don't know. Bullet might have hit bone. Might have fragmented. Won't know until I get in there." He met her eyes. "But if I don't try, you die. That's certain." Clara took another long pull from the whiskey bottle, then set it aside. I'm ready. She wasn't. Nobody ever was. Cole picked up the probe and leaned in close. The scream, when it came, was the sound of every nightmare the frontier held. Clara didn't remember most of it afterward. Just fragments, like shards of broken glass cutting through fog. The probe sliding into her leg, searching, searching. Cole's voice, steady and low. Almost there. Hold on. Her own hands clutching the bed frame, knuckles white. The terrible scraping sound as metal touched metal. The feeling of the forceps going in, spreading the wound wider. And the pain beyond anything she'd thought possible. A white-hot brand that erased thought, erased everything except the animal need to escape. But there was nowhere to go. So she screamed until her voice gave out, until there was nothing left but ragged gasps. And through it all, Cole's hands stayed steady. When he finally withdrew the forceps, they held a misshapen chunk of lead. He dropped it into a tin cup with a clink, then packed the wound with clean cloth soaked in whiskey. It's out, he said. Worst is over. Clara couldn't respond. She was somewhere beyond language now, beyond anything except the slow understanding that she was still alive, still breathing. Cole worked quickly, stitching the wound closed with neat, precise sutures. He wrapped it in clean bandages, tied them snug but not tight. Then he covered her with a blanket and stepped back. You did good, he said quietly. Clara's eyes were already closing. The whiskey, the pain, the sheer exhaustion of survival, it all crashed over her at once. She felt herself falling into darkness and didn't fight it. The last thing she heard was Cole banking the fire and settling into the chair beside the bed, his rifle across his knees. I'll keep watch, he said, though she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or himself. Then sleep took her under, and for a few hours at least there was no pain, no fear, no frontier stretching endlessly in all directions. Just darkness, and the distant sound of a creek running over stones. Basset. Clara woke to morning light streaming through the cabin's single window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why every inch of her body hurt. Then it all came flooding back. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Her leg felt like it was being stabbed by 1,000 hot needles. Don't move. Cole appeared beside the bed with a tin cup. Drink this. It's willow bark tea. Help with the pain. Clara took the cup with shaking hands and sipped. It was bitter, almost undrinkable, but she forced it down. How long was I asleep? Her voice was a rasp. 8 hours. Sun's been up about 2. Clara looked past him and saw the evidence of his vigil. The chair pulled up beside the bed, the rifle still within reach, the coffee pot that had clearly been refilled multiple times. His eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. You didn't sleep, she said. Couldn't risk it. Taggart's gang knows 3 of their men came after you. When they don't come back, they'll come looking. The reality of it hit Clara like a physical blow. They'll find us here. Maybe. Probably. Cole took the cup from her and refilled it from the kettle. But you're in no shape to travel. We're staying put for at least 2 days, maybe 3. Need to make sure that wound doesn't go septic. And if they come before then? Cole's expression didn't change. Then I deal with it. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. One man against a gang of killers. Claire had heard stories about frontier marshals, the kind of men who walked into outlaw camps alone and walked out with prisoners. She'd always thought they were exaggerations. Looking at Cole Barrett, she wasn't so sure anymore. Tell me about them, she said. Taggart's gang. How many? 7, not counting the ones from yesterday. Samuel Taggart leads them. 48 years old, been killing since he was 15. His brother Daniel rides with him. Then there's a half-breed tracker named Chavez, probably the most dangerous of the lot. The rest are just guns for hire. 7 against 1. I've had worse odds. Clara wanted to believe him, but the fear was a cold weight in her stomach. What if I hadn't seen their faces? What if I couldn't identify them? Doesn't matter now. They think you can, and that's enough. They'll come. Cole's jaw tightened. But I'll be ready. He moved to the window and looked out at the prairie. Clara watched him, this hard-edged stranger who'd saved her life twice now and seemed prepared to do it a third time. Why? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Cole turned, one eyebrow raised. Why what? Why are you doing this? You could take me to the nearest town, leave me with a doctor. Go after Taggart yourself. You don't owe me anything. For a long moment, Cole was silent. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Nearest town is 40 miles. You wouldn't make the trip, and Taggart doesn't know where I am. Soon as I move you, he'll see it. Trail of a wounded person's easy to follow. It was a practical answer, a marshal's answer, but Clara saw something else in his eyes, something older, darker. A debt he was paying to ghosts she couldn't see. Besides, Cole added, turning back to the window, those men on the stagecoach, the ones who died, they deserved better than what they got. Way I see it, making sure you survive is part of finishing the job. Clara lay back against the pillow, her leg throbbing in time with her heartbeat. Outside, the prairie stretched on forever, beautiful and brutal under the morning sun. Somewhere out there, 7 men were coming, and all that stood between them and Clara was one tired marshal with a rifle and a determination that bordered on suicide. She closed her eyes and tried to believe it would be enough. The fever came that night. Clara woke in darkness, her body drenched in sweat, her leg burning like someone had laid a hot iron against the wound. She tried to call out, but her throat was too dry, the sound dying before it could form words. Cole was there instantly, as if he'd been waiting for exactly this. His hand pressed against her forehead, and he swore under his breath. It started, he said, more to himself than to her. Damn it! He moved with controlled urgency, throwing more wood on the fire until the cabin blazed with light and heat. Clara's teeth chattered despite the warmth. She felt like she was freezing and burning at the same time, her body unable to decide which way to die. Cole unwrapped the bandage on her leg, and Clara smelled it before she saw it, the sickly sweet stench of infection. The wound had gone red and angry, weeping fluid that wasn't quite pus, but wasn't clean either. Is it bad? Clara managed through chattering teeth. Cole's face was grim. It's not good, but I've seen worse. He was already reaching for supplies, moving between the shelves and the fire with the efficiency of a man who'd fought this battle before. Going to clean it again, pack it with honey and yarrow, old cavalry trick, might slow the infection down. And if it doesn't? He met her eyes for just a moment. Then we'll deal with that when we get there. The cleaning was agony. Cole poured whiskey directly into the wound and Clara screamed, her hands fisting in the blanket so hard she thought her fingers might break. Then came the honey, thick and sticky, pressed deep into the wound with clean cloth. The yarrow leaves went on top, their bitter smell mixing with the honey. Breathe, Cole said quietly. Just breathe through it. Clara tried. She really did. But the pain was a living thing now, a creature with teeth that gnawed at her leg and sent tendrils of fire up through her hip, her belly, her chest. Her vision blurred. The cabin spun. Cole wrapped the wound in fresh bandages, then pulled the blanket up over her. You need to drink, he said, holding a cup of water to her lips. Clara drank, though half of it spilled down her chin. The water was cool and sweet, probably from the creek. It helped a little. The Taggart gang, she whispered. If they come while I'm like this, they won't get to you, I promise. You can't promise that. Yes, Cole said flatly. I can. There was something in his voice that made Clara believe him despite the fever, despite the fear. A certainty that went beyond confidence into something harder, colder. This was a man who'd made promises before and kept them, no matter the cost. She wanted to ask him about it, about the wife and daughter she'd glimpsed in his expression yesterday, about the weight he carried behind those pale blue eyes. But the fever dragged her back down into darkness before she could form the words. Through the long night, Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was back on the stagecoach, watching the driver's body fall in slow motion. Sometimes she was in Silver Creek, teaching children their letters while the Montana wind rattled the windows. Sometimes she was nowhere at all, just floating in a gray space where pain was the only thing that felt real. And through it all, Cole was there, changing the bandages, forcing water between her lips, keeping the fire burning. His presence was the one constant, the anchor that kept her from drifting away entirely. Once, Deep in the night, she opened her eyes to find him sitting in the chair beside the bed, his rifle across his knees, staring at nothing. The firelight caught the planes of his face, throwing shadows that made him look older, harder. "Cole," she whispered. He turned to her immediately. "I'm here. Tell me something true." He was quiet for a long moment. "Like what?" "Anything. Just, I need to hear something real, something that's not fever dreams and pain." Cole leaned back in the chair, his eyes distant. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Sarah. She used to collect rocks from the creek, smooth ones worn down by water. She'd line them up on the windowsill and name every single one." His voice was soft, almost dreamlike. "When she died, I buried her with her favorite rock in her hand. It was white quartz, about the size of a silver dollar. She called it Moon." Clara's heart ached. "How old was she?" 7. "I'm sorry." "Me too." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "She would have liked you. Sarah was smart, always asking questions, wanting to know how everything worked. You remind me of her a little. That stubbornness." "Is that why you're helping me?" "No." Cole's jaw tightened. "I'm helping you because those bastards don't get to win. Not this time." Before Clara could respond, exhaustion pulled her back under. But this time, the darkness was a little less frightening. This time, she wasn't alone in it. The fever broke near dawn. Clara woke to find her nightgown soaked through, but her head clearer than it had been in hours. The pain in her leg had settled into a dull, persistent throb, instead of the screaming agony of before. Cole was asleep in the chair, his head tilted back, the rifle still across his lap. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper in the gray morning light. Clara watched him for a while, this stranger who'd become her only hope of survival. There was something almost peaceful about him in sleep, a softness that the waking world didn't allow. She wondered what he'd been like before the frontier had worn him down to this, before loss and violence had carved away everything except duty and determination. As if sensing her gaze, Cole's eyes snapped open. He was instantly alert, his hand moving to the rifle. "Easy," Clara said softly. "It's just me." Cole relaxed slightly, then leaned forward to press his hand against her forehead. "Fever's down. I feel better. Weak, but better." "Good, that's good." He stood, stretching muscles that had been cramped in the chair all night. "I'll make coffee. You need to eat something." While Cole worked at the fire, Clara tried to sit up. Her leg protested, but she managed it, propping herself against the rough log wall. Through the window, she could see the prairie waking up, the grass turning gold in the early light, a hawk circling high overhead. "How long before they come?" she asked. Cole glanced at her as he poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "Could be today, could be tomorrow. Depends on when they figure out their men aren't coming back." "What's the plan?" "Keep you alive. Kill anyone who tries to stop that." Clara accepted the coffee he handed her, wrapping her hands around the warm metal. "That's not much of a plan." "It's the only one we've got." Cole sat down at the table, his own coffee steaming in front of him. "This cabin's defensible. Good sightlines, water close by. Only one approach that doesn't leave a man exposed for 50 yards. If they come, we'll see them coming. And then? And then I do what I'm paid to do." There was a finality in his tone that discouraged further questions. Clara sipped her coffee and tried not to think about 7 men with guns riding toward them across the prairie. They ate a sparse breakfast of beans and hardtack. Clara's stomach rebelled at first, but she forced the food down, knowing she'd need the strength. Cole ate mechanically, his attention never straying far from the window. "I need to check the horses," he said after they'd finished, "and set up some early warnings around the perimeter. You'll be alone for maybe 20 minutes. Can you handle that?" Clara nodded, though the thought of being defenseless in the cabin made her chest tight. "I still have the Derringer. Found it in my skirt pocket." Cole's eyebrow rose. "The one you shot Eddie with?" "The same. Still has 1 bullet left." "Keep it close." He stood and grabbed his rifle. "Anyone comes through that door who isn't me, you shoot first and ask questions never. Understand?" "I understand." Cole paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Clara, I meant what I said. They don't get to win." Then he was gone, and Clara was alone with the crackling fire and her racing thoughts. She pulled the Derringer from her pocket and checked it. One bullet, one chance. If it came to that, she'd have to make it count. The minutes crawled by. Clara kept the gun in her lap and her eyes on the door, every sound making her jump. A bird calling outside, the wind rattling the shutters, her own heartbeat loud in her ears. When Cole finally returned, she nearly shot him out of pure nerves. "Easy," he said, raising his hands as he came through the door. "Just me." Clara lowered the Derringer, her hands shaking. "Sorry, I'm a little jumpy." "That's good. Jumpy keeps you alive out here, Sal." Cole set his rifle by the door and crossed to the window. "Set up some warning lines with tin cans and wire. Anyone tries to approach quiet-like, we'll hear them coming." "Did you see anything?" "No, but that doesn't mean they're not out there." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Clara, I need you to understand something. When they come, and they will come, it's going to get loud and bloody. You need to stay down, stay quiet, and don't try to help unless I tell you to. Can you do that?" Every instinct, Clara had screamed against the idea of hiding while someone fought for her life. But she also knew she'd be more liability than asset in a gunfight, especially with her leg barely functional. "I can do that," she said quietly. Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Now rest while you can. I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get." The day passed in tense waiting. Cole moved between the window and the door, always watching, always ready. He cleaned his guns, checked his ammunition, and made small improvements to the cabin's defenses, moving the table to create better cover, stacking firewood by the windows to serve as makeshift barricades. Clara watched him work, marveling at the calm efficiency of it all. This was a man who'd prepared for violence so many times it had become routine. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked during one of his pauses. Cole glanced at her. "War taught me most of it. The rest I picked up the hard way." "You were in the war?" "Cavalry. Spent 3 years riding through Missouri and Kansas, chasing guerrillas and bushwhackers. Saw some things that'd turn your hair white." He sat down at the table, his hands absently disassembling and reassembling his revolver. "When it ended, I came west. Figured the frontier couldn't be worse than what I'd left behind." "Was it?" "Different. Not better, not worse. Just different." His hands paused. "War's honest, at least. You know who the enemy is, what you're fighting for. Out here, it's all shades of gray. Good men doing bad things to survive, bad men claiming they're just trying to make a living. Gets hard to tell the difference after a while." Clara thought about the young outlaw Cole had let walk away. "Is that why you spared that boy? Because you couldn't tell which he was?" "No. I spared him because killing him wouldn't have made anything better. He was already shot, already scared. Putting another bullet in him would have just been meanness disguised as justice." Cole looked up at her. "Don't mistake me, though. If he'd gone for his gun, I'd have killed him without a second thought. Mercy has limits out here." "That must be exhausting," Clara said quietly. "Always having to decide who lives and who dies." "It is." Cole's voice was barely above a whisper. "Some days I think about just walking away, hanging up the badge, finding a quiet place, and letting someone else make those decisions." "Why don't you?" "Because if I stop, who takes over? Some green kid who'll get himself killed in the first month? Some political appointee who doesn't know the difference between justice and revenge?" He shook his head. "No, this is my job. I'll do it until I can't anymore." Before Clara could respond, a distant sound carried across the prairie, the faint jangle of a horse's tack. Cole was on his feet instantly, moving to the window with his rifle. "Get down," he said quietly. "Behind the bed. Now." Clara's heart hammered as she slid off the bed and crawled behind it, her wounded leg screaming in protest. She clutched the Derringer in both hands, trying to steady her breathing. Cole stood perfectly still at the window, watching. The seconds stretched into minutes. The only sound was Clara's ragged breathing and the crackle of the fire. Then Cole relaxed slightly. "False alarm, just a wild horse dragging a broken rein." Clara sagged against the bed frame, relief and terror mixing in equal measure. "How much longer can we do this?" "As long as we have to." But even as he said it, Clara saw something in his expression, a calculation, a weighing of odds. He was preparing for the inevitable, running through scenarios in his mind, planning for a fight he knew was coming. Night fell again, and with it came a tension so thick Clara could taste it. Cole lit only one small lamp, keeping the cabin mostly in shadow. He positioned himself by the window where he could see out but couldn't be easily seen. "Try to sleep," he told Clara. "I'll wake you if anything happens." But sleep was impossible. Clara lay in the darkness, every nerve on edge, waiting for the sound of gunfire or the crash of the door breaking in. Instead, what came was something worse: silence. Around midnight, even the usual night sounds of the prairie went quiet. No crickets, no distant coyotes. Just an oppressive stillness that made Clara's skin crawl. Cole noticed it too. She saw him tense, his grip tightening on the rifle. "They're here," he breathed. Clara's heart stopped. "How do you know?" "The animals went quiet. That only happens when predators are close." He moved away from the window, staying low. Multiple riders, probably circling to find the best approach. They'll wait until just before dawn, when we're most likely to be asleep. "What do we do?" "We wait. Let them come to us." Cole looked at her across the dark cabin. "Remember what I said. Stay down. Don't move unless I tell you to." The hours that followed were the longest of Clara's life. She huddled behind the bed, the derringer slick with sweat in her hands, listening to every creak and whisper of the night. Her leg throbbed in time with her heartbeat, a constant reminder of how vulnerable she was. Cole was a statue by the window, barely breathing, watching the darkness outside with the patience of a man who'd hunted and been hunted more times than he could count. The sky was just beginning to lighten, that gray pre-dawn moment when the world held its breath. When Cole whispered, "Here they come." Clara heard it then, the soft crunch of boots on grass, moving carefully, trying to stay quiet. Multiple sets, coming from different directions. "3 from the front," Cole murmured, more to himself than to her. "2 circling around back. Smart. They're trying to pin us." A voice called out from the darkness, rough and mocking. "Marshal Barrett, we know you're in there. Send out the girl and we'll let you walk away." Cole didn't respond. "Come on, Barrett. Don't be stupid. She ain't worth dying for." Still nothing from Cole. Clara watched him, saw the cold calculation in his eyes. He was counting, measuring distances, waiting for the moment. "Your choice, Marshal." The voice was closer now, maybe 30 yards out. "We're coming in either way." "Now," Cole said softly. Everything happened at once. The front window shattered as bullets tore through it. Cole was already moving, dropping below the sill and returning fire with precise measured shots. Glass and wood splinters filled the air. The back door exploded inward, kicked off its hinges. A man burst through, gun raised, and Cole spun, firing twice. The outlaw went down hard, blood spreading across the floor. Another man came through the broken window, diving for cover behind the overturned table. Cole shot him in midair, the body crashing into the furniture. Outside, someone screamed, high and terrified. One of Cole's shots had found its mark, but there were still more. Clara heard boots pounding around the cabin, heard shouting, heard the distinctive sound of rifles being cocked. Cole dropped behind the bed beside her, ejecting spent shells and reloading with hands that didn't shake. 2 down, at least 3 left, he said calmly. Stay low. A volley of gunfire tore through the cabin from multiple directions. Bullets punched through the log walls, kicking up splinters and dirt. The lamp shattered, plunging them into near darkness lit only by the dying fire. Cole rose and fired, dropped, moved to a new position, fired again. He was everywhere at once, making them think there were multiple defenders instead of just one man with a rifle and cold determination. But Clara could see what he couldn't. He was bleeding. A bullet had grazed his left arm, leaving a line of red down his sleeve. He didn't seem to notice or care. "Barrett!" the voice from outside again, different this time, commanding. "You killed 4 of my men. This ends now." Samuel Taggart had to be. "Come get me," Cole called back, his voice hard as iron. A shadow moved past the broken window. Cole fired, and the shadow jerked and fell. 5, Cole muttered. But Clara saw something he didn't. Another man coming through the back door, moving low and fast. Her hand came up with the derringer almost of its own accord. Cole! She screamed. The outlaw turned toward her voice, his gun rising. Clara fired her last bullet. The Derringer's bark was small, almost pathetic compared to the rifle's, but the bullet found its home in the man's chest. He stumbled backward, surprise and pain mixing on his face, and collapsed across the threshold. Cole spun, took in the scene, then nodded at Clara. Good shot. Before she could respond, something came through the broken window, a bottle with a rag stuffed in it, flames already licking up the cloth. Fire! Cole shouted, diving for it. He grabbed the bottle and hurled it back through the window. It exploded outside in a whoosh of flame and screaming. But the damage was done. Flames had caught on the wooden floor, fed by spilled whiskey and lamp oil. Fire raced across the boards, climbing the walls, filling the cabin with smoke. Cole made a split-second decision. We have to move. Can you walk? I don't know. That wasn't a question. He grabbed her arm and hauled her upright. Claire's leg buckled, but he caught her, his arm around her waist. We go out the side window. I'll cover us. You just run. Cole, Run, Clara. Don't stop. Don't look back. Make for the tree line by the creek. I'll find you. There was no time to argue. The cabin was filling with smoke, the fire spreading fast. Cole half carried, half dragged her to the side window and boosted her through. She hit the ground outside hard, her leg exploding in agony. Behind her, Cole came through the window and immediately dropped to one knee, his rifle coming up. 2 shots. One of the remaining outlaws went down. Run! Cole shouted. Clara ran. It wasn't running, really, more like a desperate, lurching stumble. But she moved, her wounded leg dragging, her breath coming in gasps. Behind her, she heard gunfire, heard Cole's rifle answering, heard men shouting. The tree line was 50 yards away, might as well have been 50 miles, 20 yards. Bullets kicked up dirt around her feet, 10 yards. She could hear someone coming up behind her, could hear him breathing. 5 yards. A gunshot. Impossibly close. Clara flinched, expecting pain, but nothing happened. She glanced back and saw one of the outlaws falling, Cole standing in the doorway of the burning cabin, his rifle still smoking. Then Clara was in the trees, collapsing behind a cottonwood, her chest heaving. She looked back at the cabin. Cole was still there, silhouetted against the flames, facing down the last 2 members of the Taggart gang. Even from this distance, she could see he was hurt, favoring his left side, moving slower than before. Barrett! Samuel Taggart's voice raw with rage. You've killed my brother, my men, all for a woman you don't even know. I know enough, Cole called back. I know you're a murdering bastard who's terrorized this territory long enough. Big words from a dead man. Taggart and his remaining man emerged from the darkness, guns drawn. Cole fired, catching Taggart's partner in the shoulder. The man spun and went down. But Taggart fired at the same moment, and Clara saw Cole stagger, saw him fall to one knee. No, she whispered. Taggart walked forward, his gun aimed at Cole's head. Should have minded your own business, Marshal. Cole looked up at him, blood on his lips. Should have stopped killing innocent people. Then his hand moved, fast, impossibly fast for a wounded man, and a Derringer appeared in his grip. Cole's hideout gun, Clara realized distantly, the one she hadn't known he carried. The little gun cracked once. Taggart's head snapped back and he went down like a felled tree, dead before he hit the ground. Cole swayed, then collapsed beside him. Clara was moving before she realized it, stumbling out of the trees toward the burning cabin. Her legs screamed, but she didn't care. All she could see was Cole lying there in the dirt, not moving. Cole! She fell to her knees beside him, her hands pressing against the wound in his side. Blood welled up between her fingers, hot and wet. Cole! Stay with me! His eyes fluttered open. Told you. To stay in the trees. Shut up. Just shut up and don't you dare die on me. Not planning. On it. His hand came up, gripping hers. They all dead? Clara looked around wildly. Bodies littered the ground around the cabin. 7 men, just like Cole had said, all of them still. They're dead, she said. You got them. You got them all. Good. Cole's eyes started to close. No, Cole, stay awake. Clara looked toward the burning cabin. No help there. The horses were long gone, spooked by the gunfire. It was just the two of them, alone on the prairie at dawn, with Cole bleeding out in her arms. She did the only thing she could think of. She tore strips from her already ruined dress and packed them against the wound, pressing hard despite Cole's grunt of pain. She used his belt to tie the makeshift bandage in place, pulling it as tight as she could. "I need to get you to town," she said, "to a real doctor." "No time. Lose too much blood." "Then don't. Don't lose it. Keep it inside where it belongs." Claire's voice broke. "You saved my life, Cole Barrett. Twice, 3 times. I'm not letting you die now. Do you understand me?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn, you have no idea." The sun was rising now, painting the prairie in shades of gold and red. The cabin burned behind them, collapsing in on itself in a shower of sparks. Clara held Cole against her, his blood soaking through her makeshift bandages, and refused to let go. She didn't know how long they stayed like that. Minutes, hours. Time lost meaning. All that mattered was the rise and fall of Cole's chest, the proof that he was still breathing, still fighting. Finally, impossibly, she heard it, the sound of horses approaching. Multiple riders, moving fast. Clara grabbed Cole's rifle with one hand, keeping the other pressed to his wound. If these were more outlaws, more members of Taggart's gang she didn't know about, then she'd go down fighting. But the riders that emerged from the smoke and early morning haze wore badges. 3 men, all armed, all looking shocked at the carnage they'd found. "Marshal Barrett," one of them called out, dismounting quickly. "We heard the shooting." He stopped as he took in the scene. 7 dead outlaws. A burning cabin. Cole bleeding on the ground, with a woman he'd never seen before holding him together through sheer will. "We need a doctor," Clara said, her voice hoarse. "Right now, please." The marshal, a younger man with a deputy's star, nodded quickly. "Nearest town is 40 miles, but we've got horses and a wagon 2 miles back. We can make it if we hurry." They moved Cole carefully, lifting him onto one of the horses. Clara climbed up behind him, her arms around his waist, holding him steady. Her own legs screamed in protest, but she ignored it. "Hold on," she whispered into Cole's ear as they began to ride. "Just hold on a little longer." "Always do," Cole murmured. And despite everything, the pain, the fear, the blood and death and burning cabin, Clara believed him. The 40 miles to Redemption Creek took forever, and no time at all. Clara held Cole against her chest as the horse beneath them ate up the distance, every jarring step sending fresh blood seeping through the bandages she'd tied around his middle. The 2 deputy marshals rode ahead, one of them galloping forward to alert the town doctor, while the other stayed close enough to help if Cole fell. He didn't fall. Somehow, impossibly, Cole Barrett stayed conscious through most of that brutal ride, his jaw clenched tight against the pain, his hand gripping Clara's arm with surprising strength. "Talk to me," Clara said into his ear, desperate to keep him focused, to keep him from slipping away. "Tell me about your daughter. Tell me about Sarah and her rocks." Cole's voice was barely a whisper. She'd spend hours by the creek, sorting them by color, by shape. What was her favorite besides the white one? "Blue, piece of turquoise, the size of my thumb. Said it looked like piece of sky." "Where did she find it?" "Traded for it. Gave a boy her favorite hair ribbon. I was mad at first, then she explained, said the sky was more important than looking pretty." Clara felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. "She sounds like she was smart. Too smart. Always asking questions. Why this? Why that?" A sound that might have been a laugh bubbled up from Cole's throat, ending in a cough that brought blood to his lips. "Reminded me of you. Moment I saw you. Same fire. Same stubbornness." "You better not be saying goodbye," Clara said fiercely. "You better not be giving me her memory like it's some kind of parting gift." "Not saying goodbye." Cole's grip on her arm tightened. "Saying, worth it, saving you, was worth it. It won't be worth anything if you die. So don't." The town appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of wooden buildings huddled around a main street, smoke rising from chimneys, the morning sun glinting off windows. It wasn't much, just another frontier settlement trying to carve civilization out of wilderness. But to Clara, it looked like salvation. The deputy marshal who'd ridden ahead was waiting at the edge of town with an older man carrying a medical bag. The doctor took one look at Cole, and his weathered face went grim. "Get him to my office, now. And someone fetch my assistant. I'm going to need help with this." They carried Cole into a small building that served as both the doctor's office and his home. The front room had been converted into a surgery of sorts. A long table, cabinets full of instruments and bottles, the smell of carbolic acid and blood and desperation. "Put him here," the doctor ordered, gesturing to the table. "Carefully. That's it." As they laid Cole down, his eyes found Clara's. "You should go." "Not a chance." "Going to get messy?" "I've seen messy. I'm staying." The doctor glanced at her, taking in her blood-stained dress, her bandaged leg, the exhaustion written in every line of her face. "You need treatment yourself, young lady. After him." "Miss, after him." Clara's voice left no room for argument. The doctor studied her for another moment, then nodded. "Fine. But stay out of my way. I can't work with people hovering." He turned to his assistant, a young man who'd just arrived. "Michael, get the chloroform and more bandages, all of them." What followed was the longest 2 hours of Clara's life. She sat in a corner of the room, watching as the doctor worked over Cole with steady hands and grim concentration. The chloroform kept Cole unconscious, which was both a mercy and a terror. At least he wasn't in pain, but Clara couldn't see him breathing, couldn't see any sign that he was still fighting. The bullet had gone clean through, which the doctor said was good luck, but it had torn through muscle and nicked something important. The doctor used words like vascular damage and significant blood loss that made Clara's stomach turn. She watched as he cleaned the wound, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Watched as he stitched layer after layer of damaged tissue back together. Watched as blood soaked through towel after towel until she lost count. "Is he going to make it?" she finally asked, unable to bear the silence any longer. The doctor didn't look up from his work. "I don't know. He's lost a lot of blood. The next 24 hours will tell. If he makes it through tonight without fever, without the wound going septic, then maybe. Maybe." It wasn't the answer Clara wanted, but it was honest. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept watching. When the doctor finally stepped back, his hands and apron covered in blood, he looked as exhausted as Clara felt. "That's all I can do. The rest is up to him." "Can I stay with him?" "You need to let me look at that leg." "After I know he's stable." The doctor sighed, but didn't argue. "He's stable as he's going to be for now. But you're not doing him any favors by collapsing yourself. Sit down and let me work." Reluctantly, Clara let the doctor examine her leg. He unwrapped the honey and yarrow poultice Cole had applied and whistled low. Whoever treated this knew what they were doing. Probably saved your leg, maybe your life. He cleaned the wound with gentle hands. "It's infected, but not as bad as it could be. The honey helped. I'm going to clean it properly, give you some laudanum for the pain, and keep you off it for at least a week, maybe 2. "I don't have 2 weeks. You don't have a choice. This leg needs to heal or you'll lose it. Understand?" Clara understood. She gritted her teeth through the cleaning and the fresh stitches, refusing the laudanum until the doctor practically forced it down her throat. The drug hit her system like a wave of warm honey, dulling the edges of everything. "There's a boarding house 2 doors down," the doctor said as he finished bandaging her leg. "Mrs. Chen runs it. Good woman. She'll give you a room and won't ask too many questions." "I'm not leaving him." "Miss, my name is Clara Whitmore, and I'm not leaving Cole Barrett's side until he wakes up. You can try to make me, but I promise you won't succeed." The doctor looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head with something that might have been amusement. "You're as stubborn as he is. Fine. There's a cot in the back room. You can sleep there. But if you get in my way when I'm checking on him, I'll have the sheriff drag you out. Deal?" "Deal." Clara limped to the back room and found the cot. It was narrow and uncomfortable, but it was close to Cole. She could hear his breathing from here, could hear the doctor moving around checking vitals. She meant to stay awake, to keep watch, but the laudanum had other ideas. Within minutes, she was asleep. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices arguing in low, urgent tones. can't keep bleeding like this. I've packed it twice already. Then pack it again. Clara was on her feet before she fully registered what was happening, her legs screaming in protest. She stumbled into the main room and found the doctor and his assistant bent over Cole, fresh blood staining the table beneath him. What's happening? Clara demanded. He's bleeding internally, the doctor said without looking up. Something's torn loose. I need to go back in. Will he survive it? I don't know. But if I don't try, he's dead for certain. Clara moved to Cole's side, taking his limp hand in hers. His skin was cold, clammy. His breathing was shallow and rapid. Do it, she said. Do whatever you have to do. The next hour was worse than the first surgery. Clara stood at Cole's head, holding his hand, talking to him, even though he couldn't hear her. She told him about growing up in mining camps, about learning to read by candlelight, about the day she'd decided to become a teacher. She told him about her students in Silver Creek, about the little girl who'd given her a drawing of a flower, about the boy who'd finally learned to write his name after months of trying. She talked until her voice was hoarse, until the words ran together, until she wasn't sure what she was saying anymore. But she kept talking, kept holding his hand, kept being there. Finally, the doctor stepped back. His face was gray with exhaustion. I've done everything I can. If the bleeding doesn't stop now, there's nothing else to be done. They waited. The clock on the wall ticked away seconds that felt like hours. Clara watched the bandages around Cole's middle, looking for any sign of fresh blood seeping through. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. The bandages stayed white. I think, the doctor started, then stopped. I think it's holding. Clara's legs gave out. She sank into the chair beside the table, still holding Cole's hand, and started to cry. Great, heaving sobs that tore through her chest and left her gasping. All the fear, all the terror, all the desperate hope she'd been holding back came flooding out. The doctor's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Get some rest, Miss Whitmore. You've earned it. But Clara couldn't move. She stayed there, holding Cole's hand through the long night, watching his chest rise and fall with each precious breath. Dawn came slowly, painting the sky outside the window in shades of pink and gold. Clara watched it, numb with exhaustion, her hand still clasped around Cole's. When his fingers twitched against hers, she thought she'd imagined it at first. Then his eyes fluttered open. Clara? His voice was barely audible, rough as sandpaper. I'm here. Fresh tears streamed down her face. I'm right here. The outlaws, all dead. You got them. Every single one. Cole's lips moved in what might have been a smile. Good. Don't try to talk. Save your strength. How long? 2 days. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Clara squeezed his hand gently. You died twice on that table, Cole Barrett. Twice the doctor brought you back. You're too stubborn to stay dead, apparently. Runs in the family. Despite everything, Clara laughed. Rest now. I'll be here when you wake up. Cole's eyes were already closing. Not going anywhere. Neither am I. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clara slept on the cot in the back room, ate whatever Mrs. Chen from the boarding house brought over, and spent every waking hour at Cole's side. She read to him from the town's small collection of newspapers and books. She changed his bandages when the doctor allowed it. She talked to him about everything and nothing. And slowly, impossibly, Cole got better. The fever that came on the 3rd day nearly killed him. For 48 hours he burned, delirious and thrashing, calling out names Clara didn't recognize. She stayed beside him through all of it, cooling his skin with wet cloths, forcing water between his lips, refusing to let him slip away. When the fever finally broke, Cole opened his eyes and seemed to really see her for the first time. You look terrible, he croaked. Clara laughed, the sound half-sob. You're one to talk. You look like death warmed over. Feel like it too. The doctor examined Cole that afternoon and declared himself cautiously optimistic. The wound is healing clean, no signs of infection. If he keeps improving at this rate, he might actually pull through. Might? Clara asked. Medicine isn't an exact science, Miss Whitmore. But I've seen men in far better condition not make it. The fact that he's still fighting says something about his constitution. It says he's too stubborn to die. That too. As Cole's strength returned, so did his questions. He wanted to know everything that had happened after the gunfight, how the deputies had found them, what they'd done with the bodies, what had become of Taggart's gang. Clara told him what she knew. The deputies had been tracking the Taggart gang too, following up on reports Cole had sent weeks earlier. They'd heard the gunfire from miles away and arrived just in time to find the aftermath. The 7 dead outlaws had been buried in unmarked graves outside town. Their names had been sent to every marshal's office in the territory, along with confirmation that the Taggart gang was finished. "You're a hero," Clara said. "The territorial governor sent a telegram. There's talk of a commendation." Cole made a disgusted sound. "Don't want it." "Too bad. You're getting it anyway." "Just doing my job." "Your job was to track them down and bring them to justice. You did that and saved my life in the process, multiple times. That goes beyond duty, Cole." He was quiet for a long moment, his pale eyes fixed on some distant point only he could see. "I told you before. Those people on the stagecoach deserve better. Making sure you survived was part of finishing the job." "Is that really all it was?" Cole's gaze shifted to her face. "What do you want me to say, Clara?" "The truth. The truth is complicated. I've got time." Cole sighed, wincing at the pull on his healing wound. "The truth is, I saw you out there, bleeding and terrified, and I saw Sarah. Not literally, but I saw the same fear in your eyes that she must have had when the fever took her. The fear of dying alone, of being forgotten. And I couldn't let that happen again." Clara's throat tightened. "So you saved me for her?" "I saved you for you because you deserved saving, because leaving you to die would have been the same as letting Sarah die all over again." He looked away. "Maybe that doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense." Clara took his hand, feeling the calluses, the scars, the strength still there despite everything. "Thank you. For seeing me. For fighting for me. You fought pretty damn hard yourself. That shot you made saving me from that outlaw coming through the back door, that took courage." "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear." Cole squeezed her hand gently. "You've got more courage than most men I know." "I learned from the best." They fell into silence, comfortable and warm. Outside, Redemption Creek went about its business. Horses clopping past, children shouting, the bang of a hammer from the carpenter's shop. Normal sounds, peaceful sounds. The kind of sounds that only existed when the shooting stopped. A week after the gunfight, Cole was sitting up in bed, eating solid food and complaining about being cooped up. The doctor declared him well enough to receive visitors, and a steady stream of town officials came through. The sheriff, the mayor, several prominent citizens who wanted to shake the hand of the man who'd ended the Taggart gang's reign of terror. Clara watched from her usual chair in the corner, amused by Cole's obvious discomfort with the attention. He answered their questions with clipped, efficient responses, never offering more information than absolutely necessary. "You'd think he hated being called a hero," the doctor said to Clara after the mayor finally left. "He does. Cole doesn't see himself that way. He just sees a job that needed doing." "And what do you see?" Clara looked at Cole, at the man who'd risked everything for a stranger, who'd fought off 7 outlaws to keep her safe, who'd nearly died to make sure she lived. "I see someone worth staying for," she said quietly. The doctor's eyebrow rose. "You're planning to stay in Redemption Creek?" "I don't know yet, but I know I'm not ready to leave him." "And what about Silver Creek, your teaching position?" Clara had been trying not to think about that. She'd sent a telegram to the school board explaining what had happened, but she hadn't received a response yet. For all she knew, they'd already replaced her. "One problem at a time," she said. That evening, after the doctor had left for the night and the town had quieted down, Clara sat beside Cole's bed reading aloud from a book of poetry someone had left. She'd chosen it because it was the only thing available that wasn't a newspaper or a medical text, but she found herself actually enjoying the words. "That's terrible," Cole said when she finished a particularly flowery verse about love and roses. Clara laughed. "It's not that bad." "It's absolutely that bad. Nobody talks like that. It's poetry. It's supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to be honest. That's just pretty words strung together. Fine. You do better. Cole was quiet for a moment, then began to speak. His voice was low and rough, but there was something in it that caught Clara's attention. The prairie grass bends but doesn't break. The wind comes hard and the rain comes harder, but the grass just bends. And when the storm passes, it stands back up. Not because it's strong, because it knows how to survive. Clara set the book down. That's beautiful. That's honest. That's what this place teaches you if you're paying attention. Is that what you are? Prairie grass? I don't know what I am anymore. Cole's eyes met hers. I thought I knew. Thought I was just doing a job, keeping my head down, waiting to die in the line of duty, because dying seemed easier than living. Then you stumbled into my life, bleeding and terrified and stubborn as hell, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to fight for something that mattered. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. Cole, I'm not good at this, he interrupted. I'm not good at talking about feelings or making pretty speeches. I've spent 10 years shutting that part of myself down because it hurt too much to feel anything. But sitting here, almost dying, realizing you were there the whole time, refusing to let me go, it changed something. What did it change? Made me want to live again. Not just survive, but actually live. And that scares the hell out of me because I don't know if I remember how. Clara stood and moved to the edge of the bed, taking both his hands in hers. Then we'll figure it out together. Because you changed something in me, too. You showed me what real courage looks like. What it means to fight for someone even when the odds are impossible. I came west to teach children their letters, and instead I learned what it means to be truly brave. Cole reached up, his hand cupping her cheek. You were already brave, Clara. I just helped you see it. We saved each other. Yeah, I guess we did. Clara leaned forward, her forehead resting against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, alive together, finding in each other something neither had known they needed. When she finally pulled back, Clara saw something in Cole's eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. Tentative and fragile, but real. What happens now, she asked. Now I heal. Now you heal. And then we figure out what comes next. Together? If you want. I want. 2 weeks later, Cole was strong enough to stand, to walk short distances with a cane. His wound was healing well, the doctor said, though it would leave a vicious scar. Cole didn't seem to care. He had plenty of scars already. One more didn't make much difference. Clara's leg had healed enough that she could walk without limping, though she still tired easily. The doctor said both of them would need months to fully recover, but the worst was behind them. The telegram from Silver Creek finally arrived. The school board regretted to inform her that they'd hired a replacement teacher. They hoped she understood. They wished her well. Clara read the telegram twice, feeling nothing. No anger, no disappointment, just a strange sense of relief. What will you do? Cole asked when she told him. I don't know. Look for another teaching position, I suppose. There are always schools looking for teachers out here. You could stay in Redemption Creek. The school here needs a teacher. Their last one left 6 months ago to get married. Is that what you want? Cole was quiet for a long moment. I want you to do what makes you happy. If that's staying here, then yes. If it's going somewhere else, then I'll understand. And if what makes me happy is being near you, then I'd say I'm the luckiest man in the territory. Clara smiled. Let me talk to the school board here, see if they're hiring. They were. By the end of the week, Clara had a contract to teach starting in the fall. The town would provide housing, a small cottage near the schoolhouse. The pay wasn't much, but it was enough. Cole returned to his marshal duties slowly, starting with paperwork and reports. The territorial office wanted a full accounting of the Taggart gang situation, and Cole spent days writing up every detail. When he was finally cleared for field duty, he requested assignment to the Redemption Creek area. Settling down? The head marshal asked when Cole submitted the request. Something like that. Never thought I'd see the day. Cole Barrett, the man who lived for the hunt, requesting a settled assignment. People change. That they do. Request approved. You've earned it. Summer turned toward fall. Clara prepared her schoolhouse, meeting the families whose children she'd be teaching. The town welcomed her with surprising warmth. Word had spread about what she'd survived, about how she'd stayed with Cole through his recovery, refusing to leave. In a place where most people came west to escape something, Clara's loyalty meant something. Cole healed, his strength returning day by day. He still had nightmares sometimes, still woke in the middle of the night reaching for a gun that wasn't there. But Clara was there, and that made the darkness a little easier to bear. They spent their evenings together, sometimes at the boarding house where Clara was staying, sometimes walking along the creek that ran through town. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, the uncertain future that stretched ahead. "Do you miss it?" Clara asked one evening as they sat on the creek bank watching the sun set. The hunting, the tracking, being out there. Cole considered the question. Sometimes there's a freedom in it, being on the trail, but there's also a loneliness. And I've had enough loneliness for one lifetime. What will you do now? Redemption Creek doesn't exactly have a crime problem. Small crimes, petty theft, the occasional drunk causing trouble. It's not glory, but it's honest work. He looked at her. And it means I come home every night. Home. Clara tested the word. I like the sound of that. So do I. The first day of school came with all the chaos Clara remembered from Silver Creek. Children nervous and excited, parents anxious, supplies that needed organizing. But Clara threw herself into it with joy, remembering why she'd wanted to teach in the first place. Cole stopped by during his lunch break, official business to discuss. Or so he claimed. Really, he just wanted to see her in her element, surrounded by children who hung on her every word. "Miss Whitmore," one little girl asked, "is it true you were shot by outlaws?" Clara caught Cole's eye, saw him trying not to smile. "It is. And Marshal Barrett saved you?" "He did, and I helped save him too. That's what people do when they care about each other. They help." The little girl considered this. "Are you going to marry him?" "Emma!" another child hissed. "You can't ask that." But Clara just smiled. "I don't know yet. We're still figuring things out." Cole left before he could be questioned further, but Clara saw the look on his face, pleased and embarrassed in equal measure. That night, he showed up at her cottage with dinner from Mrs. Chen's boarding house. They ate together in comfortable silence, and afterward Clara made coffee while Cole examined her small bookshelf. "You brought all these books from Silver Creek?" he asked. "Most of them. Some I've picked up here. Reading it's how I make sense of things. I never had much use for books before, but listening to you read these past weeks, I started to see the appeal." Clara handed him a cup of coffee. "I could teach you. Really teach you, I mean. You can read well enough, but there's so much more. Poetry, philosophy, history. You want to make me your special project? I want to share something I love with someone I care about." Cole set down his coffee and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "Clara Whitmore, you are the strangest, most wonderful thing that's ever happened to me. Is that your version of a compliment?" "It's the best I've got." Clara laughed and kissed him, tasting coffee and possibility, and the promise of a future neither of them had seen coming. Autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and rust. Clara's students thrived under her teaching, and the town came to see her as one of their own. Cole settled into his work, handling the small problems that cropped up with the same careful attention he'd once given to hunting outlaws. They were building something together, Clara and Cole. Not just a relationship, but a life. It wasn't the life either of them had planned. It wasn't easy or simple or without complications, but it was theirs. And after everything they'd survived, everything they'd fought through, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Winter came to Montana territory with the fury of something that had been held back too long. The first snow fell in early November, transforming Redemption Creek from a dusty frontier town into something that looked almost beautiful under its blanket of white. Clara stood at the window of her cottage watching the flakes fall, thinking about how much had changed in the 6 months since the Stagecoach Massacre. 6 months. It felt like a lifetime and no time at all. Behind her, Cole was building up the fire, his movements still slightly careful around his healing wound. The scar had settled into a thick ridge of tissue that ran from just below his ribs to his hip, a permanent reminder of how close death had come. On cold days like this, Clara knew it ached, though Cole would never admit it. "Storm's going to be bad," he said, straightening. "You should stay here tonight. Roads will be impassable by morning. Clara turned to face him. And where will you be? I was planning on staying at the boarding house, but Cole Barrett, if you think I'm going to let you walk through a blizzard to sleep in a boarding house when there's a perfectly good bed right here, you're not as smart as I thought. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. People will talk. People are already talking, have been since the day I refused to leave your bedside. Let them talk. Cole crossed the small room and pulled her into his arms. Clara went willingly, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. This had become their routine, stolen moments together, carefully balanced against the town's sense of propriety. They were courting, officially, but slowly. Both of them carried too many scars, visible and otherwise, to rush into anything. I love you, Cole said quietly into her hair. It was only the third time he'd said it. The words didn't come easily to him, shaped as he was by loss and a decade of deliberate emotional distance. Each time he spoke them, Clara felt it like a gift. I love you too, she said, even when you're being stubborn about staying in a warm house during a blizzard. I'm not being stubborn, I'm being proper. Proper is overrated. Practical is better. And practically speaking, you're staying here. Cole chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. Yes, ma'am. They spent the evening as they often did, Clara reading while Cole worked on his reports, comfortable in shared silence. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but inside the cottage it was warm and safe. Eventually, Clara set aside her book and made them both coffee, and they sat at the small table talking about nothing and everything. The territorial office wants me to train a new deputy, Cole said. Young man from Colorado. Good record, but green as spring grass. Will you do it? Don't have much choice. They're worried about coverage if something happens to me. Want to make sure there's someone who knows the territory. Clara's chest tightened at the casual reference to his mortality. Nothing's going to happen to you. You don't know that. I know you're too stubborn to die. You've proven that already. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. Clara, we need to talk about this. About what happens if... No. Clara pulled her hand back. I'm not having this conversation. Not tonight. We have to eventually. Why? Why do we have to plan for you dying? Why can't we just plan for you living? Cole sighed. Because I'm a marshal. Because my job puts me in danger. Because pretending that's not true doesn't change it. Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She walked to the window, staring out at the swirling snow. I know what your job is. I know the risks. I was there, remember? I watched you nearly die. I held you together while you bled out on the prairie. You don't get to lecture me about the dangers of frontier justice. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? Because it sounds like you're trying to prepare me to lose you, and I'm not ready for that. I'm not sure I'll ever be ready for that. Cole came up behind her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. I'm not planning to die. I'm just trying to be realistic about what could happen. You deserve to know what you're signing up for if we... He paused. If we take this further. Clara turned to face him, searching his eyes in the lamplight. Is that what you want? To take this further? You know it is. Then say it. Don't dance around it with euphemisms and careful words. Say what you mean. Cole's jaw worked for a moment, that old wariness flickering across his face. Then it cleared, replaced by something Clara had rarely seen in him, vulnerability. I want to marry you, Clara Whitmore. I want to build a life with you, whatever time we're given. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want... His voice caught. I want everything I thought I'd lost the right to want. Clara's eyes burned with tears. Then stop talking about dying and start talking about living, because that's what I want too. All of it. For as long as we can have it. Even knowing what my job demands, even knowing I might leave one day and not come back, even knowing that. Because the alternative, walking away from you, from this, because I'm afraid of loss, that's not living. That's just another kind of dying. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. When did you get so wise? I learned from a stubborn marshal who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the storm outside seemed like something happening in another world entirely. I don't have a ring, Cole said. I don't have much of anything, really, just a marshal's salary and too many scars and a history that would make most women run. Good thing I'm not most women. Is that a yes? That's a yes, Cole Barrett. I'll marry you. The smile that spread across Cole's face was like sunrise breaking over the prairie, slow, inevitable, and beautiful. He picked Clara up and spun her around the small cottage, laughing in a way she'd never heard from him before, young and free and unburdened. When he finally set her down, they were both grinning like fools. We should tell people, Clara said. Make it official. In this storm? We'd freeze before we made it to the boarding house. Then we'll tell them tomorrow. Tonight it's just ours. They stayed up late talking about the future, about where they'd live, about when they'd marry, about the life they'd build together. Cole wanted to find land outside town, build a proper house with a room for Clara's books, and a porch facing the mountains. Clara wanted a garden, and maybe chickens. Simple dreams, but precious because they'd both given up on dreaming. When they finally fell asleep, Clara in the bed and Cole on the floor wrapped in blankets despite her protests, the storm was still raging. But inside the cottage, everything was warm and right and full of possibility. Morning came gray and cold, the snow still falling but softer now. Cole woke first, built up the fire, and made coffee. When Clara emerged from the bedroom, her hair loose around her shoulders, he handed her a cup and kissed her forehead. Good morning, future Mrs. Barrett, Clara laughed. I'm keeping my name, you know. Miss Whitmore has a nice ring to it. Whatever makes you happy. They ate breakfast together, then bundled up for the walk into town. The snow was deep, nearly to Clara's knees in places, and Cole kept a protective arm around her waist. Her leg, though mostly healed, still troubled her in cold weather. The town was slowly coming to life, smoke rising from chimneys, a few hardy souls shoveling paths through the snow. They stopped first at the doctor's office, wanting to share the news with the man who'd saved both their lives. Dr. Harrison opened the door looking exhausted. Apparently Mrs. Jenkins had gone into labor in the middle of the storm, and he'd been up all night. But when Cole announced their engagement, his tired face split into a genuine smile. About damn time, I was wondering when you two would stop dancing around each other and make it official. He shook Cole's hand, then pulled Clara into a quick hug. Congratulations, you're good for each other. You think so? Clara asked. I know so. I've seen enough people in my years to recognize when two souls fit together right. You two do. He glanced at Cole. Take care of her, Barrett. She's special. I know. Word spread through Redemption Creek faster than wildfire in dry grass. By noon, half the town knew. By evening, everyone knew. People stopped them on the street to offer congratulations, to shake Cole's hand, to hug Clara. Mrs. Chen from the boarding house cried and insisted on throwing them an engagement party. The mayor promised to perform the ceremony himself. The attention made Cole uncomfortable. Clara could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his eyes kept scanning for exits. But he endured it because it mattered to her, because these people had become her community. That night, as they walked back to Clara's cottage through the trampled snow, Cole finally relaxed. That was exhausting, he said. Welcome to small-town life. Everyone knows everything about everyone. How do you stand it? Because they care. Every person who stopped us today was genuinely happy for us. That's worth a little loss of privacy. Cole grunted, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, and Clara smiled. He'd learn. He was already softer than he'd been 6 months ago, more open. The hard edges were still there, probably always would be. But they didn't cut quite as deep. The wedding was planned for early spring when the weather cleared and the prairie came back to life. Clara threw herself into preparations with the same energy she brought to teaching. She ordered a dress from the catalog, nothing fancy, but nice enough. She worked with Mrs. Chen on the menu for the reception. She helped Cole pick out a new suit, laughing at his discomfort with being measured and fitted. Through it all, Cole continued his marshal duties, training the new deputy while handling the usual small-town problems. The young man from Colorado turned out to be capable but overeager, the kind of person who saw everything as a potential shootout. Cole worked to temper that enthusiasm with reality. The job isn't about shooting people, Clara heard him tell the deputy one afternoon when they stopped by the schoolhouse. It's about preventing the need to shoot people in the first place. Most problems can be solved with words if you know how to use them. But what if words don't work? The deputy asked. Then you do what's necessary, but you exhaust every other option first. The deputy looked skeptical, and Clara understood why. Cole Barrett's reputation was built on gunfights and manhunts, not on diplomacy. But she'd seen the man beneath the reputation, had watched him talk down drunk miners and settle disputes between ranchers. The violence was always his last resort, not his first. Winter deepened. The holidays came and went in a blur of community celebrations and quiet evenings by the fire. Clara's students put on a Christmas pageant that had the entire town packed into the schoolhouse. Cole sat in the back, uncomfortable with the crowd, but smiling despite himself as the children stumbled through their lines. Afterward, one of Clara's students, a shy girl named Margaret who rarely spoke, came up to Cole and handed him a drawing she'd made. It showed a man with a star on his chest and a woman with a book standing in front of a little house. "This is you and Miss Whitmore," Margaret said quietly. "When you get married." Cole took the drawing with careful hands, studying it. "This is real good, Margaret. Thank you." The girl beamed and ran back to her parents. Cole folded the drawing carefully and tucked it in his coat pocket. "You're going to keep that, aren't you?" Clara asked. "Damn right I am." January brought a cold snap that had everyone huddling close to fires and praying for spring. It also brought trouble in the form of a range war brewing between two ranching families north of town. Cole spent days riding between the properties, trying to negotiate a peace before violence erupted. Clara worried every time he left, though she tried not to let it show. This was his job. This was what he did. She'd known that when she agreed to marry him. But knowing and accepting were two different things. On the third day of negotiations, Cole came home late with exhaustion written in every line of his body. Clara had dinner waiting, stew that had been simmering all afternoon, filling the cottage with rich smells. "Any progress?" she asked as he washed up. "Some. Got them to agree to a meeting next week with a neutral mediator. If that works, we might avoid bloodshed. And if it doesn't, then I deal with it." He sat down heavily at the table. "I'm tired, Clara. Not just physically. Tired of always being the one who has to step between angry men with guns. Tired of being responsible for keeping the peace." "Then quit." Cole's head snapped up. "What?" "Quit. Give up the badge. Find something else to do." Clara sat down across from him. "I'm serious. We don't need the marshal's salary. I make enough teaching, and you could work as a ranch hand or a carpenter or anything else. Why keep doing something that exhausts you?" "Because someone has to. Let someone else. Let that eager deputy from Colorado. Let anyone but you." Cole shook his head slowly. "I can't. Not yet. Maybe after we're married, after we've built that house and settled in. But right now, people depend on me. This territory needs experienced marshals, not just young men with fast guns and no judgment. The territory will survive without you." "Maybe. But I'm not sure I'd survive without it." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Being a marshal is all I've known for 12 years. It's how I make sense of the world. I'm not ready to give that up yet." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to make him see that he was more than his badge, more than his duty, but she saw the set of his jaw, the determination in his eyes, and knew this wasn't a fight she'd win. Not tonight. "Fine," she said quietly, "but promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll come home." "I always try to come home, Clara." "That's not good enough. Promise me." Cole stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "I promise I'll do everything in my power to come home to you. Every single time. That's the best I can give you." It would have to be enough. February brought the first hints of spring, days that climbed above freezing, snow melting in patches, birds returning. It also brought the range war to a head. The meeting Cole had arranged fell apart when one of the ranchers accused the other of rustling. Tempers flared, guns were drawn, and only Cole's intervention prevented a massacre. He came home that night with a bullet graze across his ribs and a look in his eyes that Clara had learned to recognize. the look of a man who'd seen how close death had come and was still processing it. She cleaned and bandaged the wound without speaking, her hands steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. When she was done, Cole pulled her down to sit beside him on the bed. "I'm fine," he said. "It's barely a scratch. A scratch 6 inches to the left would have killed you." But it didn't. This time, Clara's voice broke. "What about next time, Cole? What about the time after that? How many times can you walk away from bullets before your luck runs out?" "I don't know. Nobody knows that." "Then maybe it's time to stop testing it." They didn't fight often, but when they did, it was always about this, about his job, about the risks, about the future that felt increasingly fragile. The arguments never resolved anything. They just circled each other until exhaustion set in, and they agreed to disagree. That night was no different. Eventually, they fell asleep tangled together, Clara's head on Cole's uninjured side, his arm around her shoulders. In the morning, they'd go back to their routines, back to pretending everything was fine. But Clara was beginning to wonder how long they could keep pretending. March arrived with the first real warmth. The prairie exploded into life, wildflowers carpeting the grassland, creeks running high with snowmelt, the air filled with birdsong. Clara's wedding dress arrived, and Mrs. Chen organized a fitting with half the women in town offering opinions and suggestions. The wedding date was set for the first Saturday in April. Cole commissioned a local carpenter to build them a bed frame as a wedding gift to Clara, solid oak with carvings of prairie grass along the headboard. When he showed it to her, Clara cried. "It's perfect," she said, running her fingers over the intricate carvings. "How did you know?" "You told me once that prairie grass knows how to survive. Thought it was appropriate for us." They were good days those weeks before the wedding. Clara felt like she and Cole had finally found their rhythm, had learned to balance his dangerous work with their life together. The shadow of violence that had brought them together finally seemed to be fading. Then the telegram arrived. Cole was at the marshal's office when the telegraph operator brought it over. Clara was there too, having stopped by with lunch. She watched Cole's face as he read the message, watched the color drain from his skin. "What is it?" she asked. Cole handed her the telegram without speaking. Clara read it once, then again, hoping she'd misunderstood. She hadn't. A prisoner had escaped from territorial custody, a man named Jeremiah Cross who'd been part of the Taggart gang. He'd been serving time for robbery when he somehow got hold of a guard's keys and vanished into the night. According to the telegram, Cross blamed Cole for the death of Samuel Taggart, who'd apparently been Cross's cousin. He'd been heard making threats, saying he'd make Cole pay. "He's coming here," Clara said quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe he's running for Mexico and the threats are just talk." But Cole didn't sound convinced. "You think he'll come?" "I know he will. Men like Cross don't make empty threats. And he's got nowhere else to go. Every lawman in the territory will be looking for him. He'll want to settle his debt before he runs." Clara's hands started to shake. "How long?" "Week, maybe 2. Depends on how much of a head start he got." Cole took the telegram back and folded it carefully. "I need to prepare. Need to make sure the town is ready, that people know to stay inside if trouble starts." "What about our wedding?" The question hung in the air between them. Cole's expression was anguished. "We could postpone," he said quietly. "Wait until this is resolved." "No." Clara's voice was fierce. "We're not postponing our lives because of some outlaw with a grudge. We're getting married as planned." "Clara, I mean it, Cole. I've waited long enough. We've both waited long enough. If Jeremiah Cross wants to come after you, let him come. But he doesn't get to take this from us." Cole studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, we get married as planned, but I'm doubling security, and you need to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me that if shooting starts, you'll get somewhere safe and stay there. No heroics, no trying to help, just survive." Clara thought about the derringer she'd used to kill an outlaw in Cole's cabin, about holding his hand through 2 surgeries, about refusing to leave his side when everyone said she should. She'd never been good at staying safe when the people she loved were in danger. But she also knew Cole needed to hear this promise, needed to believe she'd protect herself so he could focus on the fight ahead. "I promise," she said. They both knew she was lying. The week before the wedding passed in a strange duality, joy and terror existing side by side, neither quite able to overtake the other. Clara went through her days teaching children their letters while Cole fortified the town, setting up watch posts and warning the businesses along Main Street to be ready for trouble. At night they held each other close, neither sleeping well, both listening for the sound of approaching horses. Jeremiah Cross didn't come. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather, clear skies, warm sun, the prairie alive with wildflowers. Clara woke in her cottage to Mrs. Chen knocking on the door with breakfast and half a dozen women ready to help her prepare. "Big day," Mrs. Chen said, setting down a tray of eggs and toast. "No more sleeping alone in this little cottage. Tonight you'll be Mrs. Barrett." Clara smiled despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. "I'm keeping my name, remember?" Of course, of course. Still married, though, still his wife." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "He's a good man, that Marshall. Rough around the edges, but good where it counts. You chose well." "I didn't choose him. We kind of crashed into each other and decided to hold on. Sometimes that's the best kind of choosing." The women descended on Clara with pins and combs and opinions. Her hair was styled, her dress adjusted, her face pinched until she looked properly bridal. Through it all, Clara kept glancing out the window, watching the street, looking for any sign of trouble. Cole was doing the same thing across town. He'd spent the night at the marshal's office with his deputy, both of them armed and alert. When the sun rose with no sign of Cross, the deputy had suggested maybe the outlaw had run for Mexico after all. "Maybe," Cole said, but he didn't believe it. He washed and shaved in the basin behind his desk, then put on the new suit Clara had helped him pick out. It felt strange, constraining. He was used to trail clothes, to fabric that could take abuse. This suit was too nice, too clean. It made him feel like he was playing dress-up. The deputy whistled low when Cole emerged. "You clean up nice, Marshal." "Don't start." "I'm just saying, Miss Whitmore's a lucky woman." Cole gave him a look that could have frozen whiskey, and the deputy wisely shut up. The ceremony was scheduled for noon at the small community building that served as town hall, courtroom, and gathering space. By 11:30, half the town had packed inside. Cole stood at the front with the mayor, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Every face was familiar, every person accounted for. No sign of Jeremiah Cross. Maybe the deputy was right. Maybe Cross had run. Maybe this one time, Cole would get to be happy without violence crashing through the door. Then Clara appeared at the back of the room, and every thought in Cole's head went silent. She wore a simple dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar and cuffs, and her dark hair was loose around her shoulders the way he loved. She wasn't beautiful in the conventional sense. Her face was too strong for that, marked by hardship and determination. But to Cole, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She walked down the makeshift aisle alone, having no family to give her away, needing no one to grant permission for what she'd already chosen. Her eyes locked on Cole's, and he saw everything he felt reflected back: joy, fear, hope, and love so fierce it hurt. When she reached him, she took his hands and squeezed. "You look terrified," she whispered. "I'm getting married. I'm allowed to be terrified." "Cold feet?" "Frozen solid." She laughed softly. "Too late now. You're stuck with me. That's all I want." The mayor cleared his throat and began the ceremony. Cole barely heard the words. He was too focused on Clara, on the way her hands trembled slightly in his, on the tears gathering in her eyes that she refused to let fall. This woman who'd survived a massacre, who'd endured a bullet wound and surgery without anesthesia, who'd held him together when he was dying. She was crying at their wedding. It broke something open in Cole's chest, some last wall he'd been keeping between himself and feeling too much. He'd spent so long being the hardened marshal, the man who couldn't afford emotion, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be just a man in love. "Do you, Cole Barrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the mayor asked. "I do." His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Clara's smile was radiant. "I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride." Cole cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her gently, aware of the entire town watching but not caring. She kissed him back, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for one perfect moment, everything else faded away. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone started playing a fiddle. Mrs. Chen was openly weeping. The deputy was grinning like a fool. Cole and Clara broke apart, both of them smiling, and turned to face their community. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, people calling out congratulations, children throwing wildflowers. Outside, the sun was bright and warm. The reception would be at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, where tables had been set up in the yard and enough food prepared to feed twice the town's population. But first, Cole pulled Clara around the side of the building, away from the crowd, needing a moment alone with his wife. His wife. The word felt strange and wonderful. "We did it," Clara said, laughing. "We actually did it. Did you think we wouldn't?" I kept expecting Cross to crash through the door with guns blazing. "Me too." Cole glanced around, old habits dying hard. Maybe he really did run. Or maybe he's waiting for a better moment. That's a cheerful thought on our wedding day. Clara touched his face, making him look at her. "I don't care. Let him come. We're married now. Nothing can change that." Cole kissed her again, deeper this time, pouring everything he couldn't say into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Clara Barrett." "Whitmore Barrett," she corrected, "and I love you too." They rejoined the celebration, and for the next few hours, Cole let himself forget about Jeremiah Cross. He ate Mrs. Chen's cooking, danced with his wife despite his complete lack of skill, accepted endless toasts and congratulations. Clara glowed beside him, laughing and talking with everyone, her hand constantly finding his as if to confirm he was real. This was real. They were really married. The sun was setting when the deputy approached, his expression serious. Cole's good mood evaporated instantly. "What is it?" "Ryder just came in from the North Pass. Says he saw a man matching Cross's description about 5 miles out, heading this way." Cole's jaw tightened. Of course. Of course Cross would wait until today, until the one moment when Cole had let his guard down. "Round up anyone who can shoot," he said quietly, not wanting to alarm the crowd. "Get them positioned along Main Street. If Cross comes in shooting, I want innocent people behind cover." "Cole," Clara had heard, her hand gripping his arm. "What are you going to do?" "My job." He turned to face her. "I need you to go to the schoolhouse. It's got solid walls and only one entrance. Lock yourself inside with whoever else wants shelter. I'm not leaving you." "Clara," "I said I'm not leaving you." Her voice was steel. "We just got married. If you think I'm going to hide while some outlaw tries to kill you, you don't know me at all." Cole wanted to argue, wanted to order her to safety. But he saw the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, and knew it would be pointless. This was the woman who'd shot an outlaw with a derringer while bleeding from a bullet wound. She didn't know how to stay safe when the people she loved were in danger. "Fine, but you stay behind me. No matter what happens, you stay behind me. Understand?" "I understand." The celebration ended quickly once word spread. Families hurried home to lock their doors and shutter their windows. Men with guns took up positions along the street. The deputy organized them efficiently, showing more competence than Cole had given him credit for. Within 20 minutes, Redemption Creek had transformed from a wedding party to a fortified position. Cole stood in the middle of Main Street, his rifle in hand, Clara behind him despite his repeated attempts to get her to move further back. The sun finished setting. Darkness fell across the prairie, broken only by the lamps being lit in windows and along the street. Cole's eyes adjusted, scanning the shadows, waiting. He didn't have to wait long. The sound of a horse approaching carried clearly in the still night air. A single rider, moving at a walk, not bothering to hide his approach. Cole raised his rifle, his deputy doing the same on his left. Jeremiah Cross rode into town like a man who had nothing left to lose. He was younger than Cole expected, maybe 30, with a hard face and dead eyes. He wore 2 guns on his hips and carried a rifle across his saddle. When he saw Cole waiting for him in the street, he smiled. "Marshal Barrett, heard you got married today. Congratulations." "Cross." Cole's voice was level, calm. "You're under arrest for escaping custody. Dismount slowly and put your hands up." Cross laughed. "That's not how this is going to go." "It's the only way it can go. You're outgunned and surrounded. The smart play is to surrender. Smart's never been my strong suit. Cross's eyes flicked to Clara, standing behind Cole. That the bride? Pretty little thing. Be a shame if something happened to her. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. You threatening her is the worst mistake you could make. Not threatening, just observing. Cross shifted in his saddle. You killed my cousin, Samuel Taggart. He raised me after my parents died, taught me everything I know. And you shot him down like a dog. Your cousin murdered innocent people, killed 6 passengers on a stagecoach. He died because he couldn't let it go. And now I can't let it go. Funny how that works. Cross's hand drifted toward his gun. Here's what's going to happen, Marshal. You and me, we're going to settle this the old-fashioned way. You win, I'll go back to prison peaceful. I win, your pretty bride becomes a widow on her wedding night. I'm not playing your game, Cross. You don't got a choice. Cross's hand moved. Everything happened at once. Cross drew his gun with the speed of someone who'd practiced the motion 1,000 times. Cole fired his rifle, the shot catching Cross in the shoulder and spinning him in the saddle. Cross's return shot went wide, punching through a window behind Cole. The deputy fired, hitting Cross's horse. The animal screamed and reared, throwing its rider. Cross hit the ground hard but rolled, coming up with his gun still in hand. Cole worked the rifle's lever, chambering another round, but Cross was faster. His second shot caught Cole in the upper chest, high on the right side. Cole staggered but didn't fall, his own shot going wild. Clara screamed his name. Cross turned his gun toward her. Cole didn't think. He threw himself in front of Clara just as Cross fired. The bullet hit him in the left side, just above the hip. Pain exploded through his body, but he stayed on his feet, raising his rifle one more time. This time his shot didn't miss. The bullet took Cross in the center of his chest, punching through his heart. The outlaw's eyes went wide with surprise, then empty. He toppled backward into the dirt and didn't move again. Cole dropped to his knees, his rifle clattering to the ground beside him. Clara was there instantly, her hands pressing against his wounds, her voice frantic. Cole! Cole, stay with me! The deputy ran over, his face pale. I'll get the doctor. Do it! Clara shouted. Now! Cole looked up at his wife, at the terror in her eyes, and tried to smile. I'm okay. It's not that bad. Don't you dare lie to me. You're shot twice. How is that okay? Because you're safe. That makes it okay. You idiot. You absolute idiot. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she tried to stop the bleeding. Why did you do that? Why did you throw yourself in front of me? What else was I supposed to do? Let him shoot you? Cole coughed, tasting copper. Not an option. Dr. Harrison arrived at a run, his medical bag in hand. He took one look at Cole and his expression went grim, but he didn't waste time with words. He just started working, cutting away Cole's new suit to expose the wounds. Clara stayed beside Cole, holding his hand, refusing to move even when the doctor tried to send her away. Her wedding dress was soaked with blood. Cole's blood. But she didn't seem to notice or care. Talk to me, she said desperately. Stay awake. Tell me something. Cole's vision was starting to blur at the edges, darkness creeping in. Remember what I said about prairie grass? Yes. It bends but doesn't break. Your prairie grass, Clara. Strongest thing I've ever known. He squeezed her hand weakly. Whatever happens, you'll be okay. Nothing's happening. You're going to be fine. Tell me you're going to be fine. Can't make promises. I can't keep. Cole, no. No, no, no. You stay with me. You hear me? We just got married. We have a whole life to live. You don't get to die on our wedding day. You don't get to leave me. Not leaving. Love you. Always. His eyes closed. Cole! Clara's scream was raw, primal. Cole! The doctor worked frantically, his hands covered in blood. The deputy stood nearby, useless, watching in horror. Other townspeople had emerged from their hiding places, gathering in a silent circle around the fallen marshal. For long minutes, Dr. Harrison worked in tense silence. Finally, he sat back on his heels and looked at Clara. I need to get him to my office. These wounds need proper treatment. Help me carry him. 4 men stepped forward, lifting Cole carefully. They carried him through the darkened streets to the doctor's office, Clara walking beside him the entire way, never letting go of his hand. Inside, they laid him on the same table where Clara had watched him fight for his life once before. History repeating itself, she thought distantly. The frontier taking and taking until there was nothing left. The doctor turned to her. "This is going to take hours. You should—" "I'm staying." Clara's voice left no room for argument. "I stayed last time. I'm staying now." "Then stay out of my way and let me work." What followed was the longest night of Clara's life. She sat in the corner, her blood-stained wedding dress cold against her skin, watching the doctor fight to save her husband. The wounds were bad. One had cracked a rib and nicked the top of his lung. The other had torn through muscle and possibly damaged his kidney. The doctor worked with grim determination, his assistant handing him instruments, both men moving with practiced efficiency. Clara watched it all through a haze of terror and exhaustion, unable to look away, unable to do anything except pray to forces she didn't believe in that Cole would survive. Dawn was breaking when the doctor finally stepped back, washing his hands in the basin. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but there was something in his expression that made Clara's heart leap. "He's alive?" she whispered. "He's alive. I don't know how, but he's alive. The lung injury isn't as bad as I feared, more of a graze than a puncture. The kidney wound is more serious, but if infection doesn't set in, he should recover." "Should? That's the best I can give you. The next few days will tell. If he makes it through without fever, without complications, then yes, he'll recover." Clara stood on shaking legs and moved to Cole's side. He looked terrible, pale as death, bandaged and still, barely breathing. But he was breathing. That was enough. She pulled up the chair she'd occupied so many times before and took his hand. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." The days that followed were a nightmare of watching and waiting. Cole's fever came on the second day, raging hot, making him delirious. He thrashed and called out, reliving old battles, old losses. Clara stayed beside him through all of it, cooling his skin with wet cloths, forcing water between his lips when he'd take it. On the third day, the fever broke. Cole opened his eyes, clear and focused, and saw Clara sitting beside him. She looked terrible, exhausted, still wearing the blood-stained wedding dress because she'd refused to leave long enough to change. "You look like hell," he croaked. Clara burst into tears, great heaving sobs of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. "You're awake. You're really awake." "How long?" 3 days. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Cole tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, his face contorting with pain. Clara pushed him gently back down. "Don't move. You're still healing. The doctor says if you survive the next few days without infection, you'll probably make it." "Probably. Great odds. Better than what you had on the street." Clara wiped her eyes, trying to pull herself together. "Cross is dead. The deputy confirmed it. It's over." "Good." Cole's hand found hers. "Are you hurt? Did I get in front of you in time?" "You got in front of me. You took 2 bullets that were meant for me. You almost died, Cole. On our wedding day, you almost died." "But I didn't. I'm still here." "This time. What about next time? What about the time after that? How many times can you take bullets before—" Her voice broke. "I can't do this again. I can't watch you almost die again." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his thumb rubbing circles on the back of her hand. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Then I'll quit." Clara's head snapped up. "What?" "I'll quit. Give up the badge. The deputy's proven himself capable. He can take over. I'm done, Clara. I'm done letting this job take pieces of me. I'm done making you watch." "You mean that?" "I mean it. I promise to come home to you every time. That's a promise I can't keep as a marshal, so I'll stop being a marshal." He squeezed her hand. "I love you more than I love this job. More than I love the frontier, more than anything. If I have to choose between the badge and you, I choose you, every time." Fresh tears streamed down Clara's face, but this time they were tears of relief. "What will you do instead?" "Build that house I promised you, get some land, maybe try my hand at ranching, anything that doesn't involve getting shot at." "You'd really do that? Give up everything you've known for 12 years? Not everything. I'm gaining something far more valuable. Cole pulled her down gently, kissing her forehead. I'm gaining a life, Clara. A real life with you. That's worth more than any badge. The recovery was slow but steady. Cole healed day by day, his strength returning in increments. The doctor declared him out of danger after a week, though he cautioned that Cole would need months to fully recover from his injuries. Cole submitted his resignation to the territorial office the day he could sit up without help. The response came back quickly. Resignation accepted with gratitude for 12 years of distinguished service. The deputy was promoted to full marshal, and Cole handed over his badge without regret. Clara finally went home to change out of her ruined wedding dress. Mrs. Chen had cleaned the cottage and left fresh flowers on the table along with a note that said simply, "Welcome home, newlyweds." Clara stood in her small cottage and started to laugh, slightly hysterical, slightly relieved. They'd gotten married. Cole had almost died. And now here she was, alone in her cottage, still a virgin bride because her husband was recovering from gunshot wounds. It was the most frontier love story imaginable. When Cole was finally released from the doctor's care, Clara helped him to her cottage. He moved slowly, favoring his left side, but he moved. That was enough. "Welcome home," Clara said, helping him to the bed she'd slept in alone for the past 2 weeks. "This is your cottage. It's our cottage now. At least until we build that house you keep promising me." Cole sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the small space. "It's going to be cramped with both of us." "I don't mind cramped." Clara sat beside him. "I mind alone. Cramped is better." They spent the next weeks establishing a new routine. Clara taught during the day while Cole recovered, reading and planning the house they'd build. In the evenings, they cooked together, ate together, talked about the future they were building. It wasn't the wedding night Clara had imagined, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. 6 weeks after the shooting, Cole was cleared to resume normal activities. The scars on his chest and side had healed into thick ridges that would never completely fade. He had a collection now, the old one from the Taggart gang, these new ones from Cross. A roadmap of violence written on his skin. But he was alive. They both were. And that was all that mattered. Summer arrived with long days and warm nights. Cole and Clara rode out to the piece of land Cole had purchased, 20 acres with a view of the mountains, a creek running through one corner, rich soil that would support a garden and maybe some crops. They stood together looking at the empty prairie and imagined the house they'd build there. "Big enough for a family," Cole said quietly. Clara turned to him, surprised. "You want children?" "If you do. I know it's not something we've talked about. And after losing Sarah, I wasn't sure I could, but yes, I want children with you. I want everything with you." Clara kissed him then, deep and thorough and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, she smiled. "Then let's build that house, and then let's fill it with everything we want." They broke ground the following week. Cole worked alongside hired carpenters, his body still healing but his hands remembering the work. Clara helped when she could, holding boards steady, making decisions about window placement and room sizes. The house rose slowly through the summer and into fall. A proper 2-story structure with a porch facing the mountains, a kitchen big enough for Clara to experiment in, a study for her books, bedrooms upstairs for the family they hoped to have. The bedroom furniture Cole had commissioned arrived. The oak bed with prairie grass carvings, a dresser, a wardrobe. They moved in on a crisp October day, carrying their few possessions across the threshold together. That night, for the first time since their wedding, they were truly alone together in a space that was completely theirs. Clara stood at the window of their bedroom, looking out at the prairie stretching to the mountains. Behind her, Cole wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the day I ran across this prairie with a bullet in my leg and killers on my trail. I was certain I was going to die, certain the frontier had finally beaten me. But it didn't. No. Because you found me. Because you fought for me. Because we fought for each other." She turned in his arms to face him. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we need to be." Cole kissed her softly. "I love you, Clara Whitmore Barrett. I love you too, Cole Barrett, now and always." They made love that night for the first time as husband and wife, gentle and careful of Cole's still healing injuries. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed carved with prairie grass, listening to the wind whisper through the darkness outside. Winter came again, but this time Clara and Cole faced it together in their house on the prairie. Clara continued teaching, riding into town 3 days a week. Cole worked the land, preparing it for spring planting, caring for the small herd of cattle he'd purchased. On weekends, neighbors would stop by, and slowly they built a community around them. In early spring, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. He was quiet for a long moment, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. Then he pulled her close and held her like she was made of glass. "I'm going to be better this time," he said quietly. "I wasn't there for Sarah. I was always chasing outlaws, always gone. But I'll be here for this child, every day. I promise." "I know you will." Their daughter was born in November, delivered by Dr. Harrison in their bedroom while a blizzard raged outside. She came into the world squalling and perfect, with dark hair like Clara's and pale blue eyes like Cole's. They named her Sarah Rose. Sarah for the daughter Cole had lost, Rose for Clara's mother. Cole held her with tears streaming down his face, this tiny person who represented everything he'd thought he'd lost the right to have. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your father, and I'm going to spend every day of my life making sure you know you're loved." Life on the prairie was hard. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and crop failures, but Cole and Clara faced it all together, their love deepening with each challenge overcome. They had 2 more children, a son they named James and another daughter named Elizabeth. The house that had seemed so big when they moved in slowly filled with noise and life. Children's laughter echoed off the walls. Clara's students came to visit, and some stayed to help with harvests. The small plot of land grew into a proper ranch, modest but thriving. On their 10th anniversary, Cole and Clara stood on their porch, watching their children play in the prairie grass. Sarah Rose was teaching James his letters while Elizabeth chased butterflies, and the sight filled Clara's heart to bursting. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Cole. "Giving up the badge? The excitement?" Cole pulled her close, his arm around her waist. "Not for a single second. He gestured to their children, their land, their life. "This is everything I never knew I needed. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. The hard parts prove it's real." Clara leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and prairie wind. "I love you, Cole Barrett. I love you too, Clara. Today and every day until the prairie grass stops growing." They stood together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The frontier that had tried so hard to break them had instead forged them into something stronger. From blood and violence and near death had come this. A family, a home, a love that had survived everything the wild land could throw at them. Sarah Rose's laughter carried across the prairie as she chased after James, and Cole smiled. "She sounds just like her," he said quietly. Clara squeezed his hand, understanding. "She'd be proud of you, of all of this." "I hope so. I hope she knows that I never forgot her, that every good thing in my life now is built on the foundation of loving her. She knows, and she'd be happy that you found your way back to living." Years passed. The children grew. The ranch prospered. Cole's hair went fully gray, and Clara's developed silver streaks. The scars on Cole's body faded from red to white, but never disappeared. Every morning he woke up grateful for them because they meant he was alive. On their 20th anniversary, Sarah Rose, now 17 and preparing to attend normal school to become a teacher like her mother, asked them to tell her the story of how they met. Cole and Clara exchanged a look. Then together, they told the tale. The stagecoach massacre, the desperate flight across the prairie, the cabin shootout, the second shooting on their wedding day. Sarah Rose listened with wide eyes. "You nearly died 3 times before you even finished your first year of marriage?" "4 times if you count the fever," Cole said. "Your mother had her own close calls too. Bullet wound, infection, almost bleeding out. And you still decided to stay together? After all that?" Clara took Cole's hand, threading her fingers through his. "We didn't stay together despite all that. We stayed together because of it. Because when you survive something like that with someone, when you fight that hard to keep each other alive, you learn what really matters. And what mattered was this: building a life, raising a family, proving that courage and love and stubbornness can overcome anything. Even the frontier? Especially the frontier. Cole nodded. Your mother's the strongest person I've ever known. She taught me that surviving isn't enough. You have to live, really live. Make every day count for something. Sarah Rose smiled. That's why you named me after your first daughter, isn't it? To make sure her life counted for something too. Exactly. Cole's voice was thick with emotion. Every time I say your name, I remember her. And I remember that life is precious and fragile and worth fighting for with everything you have. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Cole and Clara sat on their porch as they had so many nights before. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful under the stars. Do you think we made the right choice? Clara asked. Building a life here instead of moving back east where it's safer? Cole was quiet for a moment, considering. The frontier isn't just a place. It's a state of being. It's about facing the unknown, about building something from nothing, about refusing to let hardship define you. We could have gone east, but we would have taken the frontier with us because it's part of who we are now. Waxing philosophical in your old age, Marshall. Former Marshall. And yes, apparently I am. He pulled her close. But I mean it. We chose this life. We chose each other. And every single day since has been a choice to keep building, keep fighting, keep loving. That's what the frontier taught us. That nothing worth having comes easy. But the struggle makes it meaningful. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the night air. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. An owl answered. The prairie was alive with the sounds of survival. I wouldn't change a thing, she said quietly. Not the stagecoach. Not the bullet. Not the fear, or the pain, or any of it. Because it brought me here. To you. To this. Me either. They sat together in comfortable silence. Two people who'd found each other in blood and violence and transformed it into something beautiful. The scars remained, inside and out, but they wore them without shame. They were proof of survival, evidence of love that refused to break. As the stars wheeled overhead, Clara thought about the terrified young woman who'd stumbled across the prairie with killers on her trail. She'd been certain she was going to die that day, certain the frontier had finally beaten her. She'd been wrong. The frontier hadn't beaten her. It had forged her, tempered her in fire and pain until she became something stronger than she'd ever imagined possible. And in the process, she'd found a love that most people only dreamed of, the kind of love that survives bullets and blood and near death. The kind of love that builds houses and raises children and transforms empty prairie into home. Cole's hand tightened around hers, and she squeezed back. They didn't need words. After 20 years, they rarely did. They communicated in touches and glances and shared silence, two souls so intertwined that the boundaries between them had blurred into irrelevance. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Outside, the prairie grass bent in the wind but didn't break, resilient and eternal. And on the porch between civilization and wilderness, Cole and Clara Barrett sat together, living proof that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to exactly where we need to be. The frontier had tried to kill them. Instead, it had made them immortal, not in the physical sense, but in the way their story would be told and retold, generation after generation. The marshal and the schoolteacher, the man who learned to live again and the woman who taught him how. A love story written in blood and healed by courage. As dawn broke over the prairie, painting the grass in shades of gold, Clara smiled. She'd come west to teach children their letters, to make a difference in a hard land. She'd done that and so much more. She'd found home. She'd found love. She'd found herself. And that was everything.